Good evening, this is Ken Spencer. I've been asked to judge your November print contest. I've been a member of the Fort Worth Camera Club since 1986 and have served as president there 6 times. I'm currently vice president. I'm a master photographer there and have won master print numerous times and master slides several times in the past. We'll start with beginner prints, and the first one is entitled On the Edge. On the Edge scores 10 points. I appreciate the fact that the exposure is good on the person on the bike, and the shutter speed was fast enough to stop the person. It looks like they may have panned along because the rock cliff on the right side of the print is really blurred. Probably, I don't know if it's because they panned with the bikist or out of the depth of field. My problem is the bike rider is dead center in the image and is looking away, so you really can't see the rider herself. I think it could have been better by having been cropped a little bit tighter and being able to see more of the rider. The second image is Losing Ground. It scores 11 points. I had a hard time finding anything of real interest about this photograph. The picnic table is in the sweet spot of the photograph. Would have been nice to have someone sitting there, and I'm assuming that the tree roots themselves are really the interesting portion of the image. I think there's a better photo here. If you got closer to those tree roots and isolated them, you might have a stronger image. Next is Vanishing Era. I like this image. It's got great depth of field front to back. If you look close at it though, there's some odd colors here on the handrails. I don't know if it's color fringing or it could be flare. I see a little flare about halfway down on the right. I did score it 11 points in spite of those errors. Next is Advancing by Robin DeRohan. By the way, A Vanishing Era was by Mary Jean Blevins. Advancing by Robert DeRohan scored second place and 12 points. I think the composition is great. Putting the lifting eye right there in the bright sun helps quite a bit. It's a interesting image. It tells a nice story. It's well printed. I scored it 12 points. I would have scored it a little bit higher had the presentation been a little better. This may be a pre-purchased 8.5 by 11 or 8 by 10 matte, and the image didn't fit the matte, so it would have scored a point higher had the matte been cut properly to fit the image. Next is Log Cabin Kitchen, first place, 14 points by James Walsh. Beautiful image. It's extremely well printed. The light on it is just great. It's really a nice print. It's well composed. I scored it 14 points. I would have given it 15, but the items hanging there from the top, I don't know, of course, from not being there, I don't know how you may have had to crop it. I would have scored it a point extra if we could see what those were hanging on, if that's possible, but it's a beautiful print, 14 points. This brings us to the intermediate class. The first print is Parrots. I scored it 9 points. They'd put on the back that it was a solarized black and white film print. I just don't, and solarization sometimes works, and to me it didn't work here. I think the white branches and the branches going off to the rear left are distracting, and I think it would have been a better print straight on. The next print is called Night Shade. I scored it 9 points. I guess the whole gnarled stump is really the subject, but my eye wanders all over looking for something to rest on. And if you're going to do a close-up like this and print it this large, it's got to be sharp, and this isn't. Next is Coleman Freeze Atlantis. I scored it 10 points. Can't get oriented here. I'm assuming you're standing on the floor looking up. Colors are pretty nice. It's kind of a low impact shot, and I can't really get too well oriented in it, so I scored it 10 points. Next print is on my way north, the butterfly is really pretty sharp. He's out of the depth of field a little bit on the left wing, but he's pretty sharp. The color is good. The exposure is very nice here, but there's not enough depth of field. The subject is so small in the print, and there's not enough depth of field to carry very far into the flowers at all. In fact, none of the flowers are actually in the depth of field. I'd like to see it taken a lot closer and a little more depth of field. I scored it 10 points. The next print is Sugar and Spice. It's well posed. By the way, I scored it 11 points. It's well posed. Her sharp elbow is not all that attractive, but it's okay. I like pretty much everything about it, except it has a misty look to it, which I think that's what you were shooting for. But there's so much nice detail that you would have had in the scene, the roses and the flowers and the dress and everything. It would have been better had I been able to see through that misty treatment that you gave it. I scored it 11 points. Also, Sugar and Spice appears to be on metallic paper. Metallic paper, and this is my personal opinion, metallic paper is great for some scenes. Chrome, brilliant colors, those kind of things. In looking at these prints, I feel like you've maybe used metallic paper a little more than I would have liked. There may be other surfaces that would have been better for you in some instances. Next is Colorado Autumn. I scored it 12 points. Colors are good. It's got great depth of field. It's sharp right there in the foreground and sharp all the way back to the mountains. It's a really nice print. I scored it 12 points. Next is entitled Mac. Mac got honorable mention with 12 points, and it's by Brian Zumbar. Just a really nice scene of this little girl and the horse. It took me a minute to see that the horse was actually tied. The black rope kind of disappears, which is great. It's well composed and well printed. It's a shallow depth of field, which shows the background out. And it's a scene you don't see every day, and just very pleasant. Next is Autumn Leaves by James Haynes. It's third place and 13 points. It's really a study in color. Boy, it just has tons of impact, and it's well composed. Very nice. 13 points. Next is Ruby-Throated Hummingbird by Don Chaplin. From where you're looking at this print, it just looks awesome. And it is a nice looking print. If you get up close though, and the reason it scored 13 points instead of higher, the colors are beautiful on it and the exposure is really nice. I think he has superimposed the bird on a different background, which is just fine, and maybe not, but there seems to be a little line around the bird. And also, in certain areas, the tail and the wing look like they've had a little bit of work done on them. It's still a really nice print, and the exposure is great, and these guys are not easy to photograph. But because I can see that it's been worked on, I scored it second place at 13 points. First place is Winter Alley by Ming Yang, I believe. I'm having a little difficult reading the name on the back of this print, but I think it's Ming Yang. If it's not someone else, please correct me, and I apologize. It scored at first place and 14 points. Composition here is really nice. The photographer has made sure to get the verticals here vertical. Photographer is in a nice place, probably a bridge, where she can keep the camera vertical and not have converging lines. It's very well exposed and very well printed. If you look close at this in the sky and some of the whites, the print's being pushed almost as far as you can push it. It's beginning to pixelate a little bit in certain areas of the white. But you've got to look really close to see that. It's a really nice print. 14 points in first place. This brings us to the advanced print class. The first print is Silver Aster 9 points. It's really, really busy. I know the sharp area is in the center or in the left side of the image to draw your eye. The rest of it is out of focus and that out of the depth of field, and that's okay because it does draw your eye to the sharpest part. But once you get there, it's just too busy for me. I gave it 9 points. Next is Yellow Desert Bloom, 10 points. There's not enough depth of field to carry this. The petals coming out toward you at the bottom of the bloom are out of the depth of field. And that would be okay if the center was really sharp, but I feel like this has been handheld and it's not sharp enough to carry it for what it is, a close-up of a flower. 10 points. Next is Garanger, Norway, 10 points. The center part of this image, the fjord, the ship down there, the snaky road going all the way down the mountain to this little berg at the bottom is just awesome. I wished you'd used a longer lens and cropped a good portion of this out. I think the hillsides on either side really don't, they add scale, but the center of interest is this road, fjord, and the little town, and it's just too small. Those items are just too small in the scene. I just wish you had a longer lens and could crop that and more on the subject. I gave it 10 points. Next is 5 Lilies. Beautiful color. It's really, really pretty colors. Very subtle and very nice. I scored it 11 points. Would have scored higher had the image been sharper, had there been more detail shown. But as it was, it scored 11 points. The next image is Evening in Cusco. Oh, it breaks my heart that the buildings here that are sunlit are not sharp. They're so soft, and what an opportunity you had, because the light is just gorgeous and the colors in the buildings are super, but when your eye goes to that light part where those buildings are and you see that there's no detail there really because it's just not sharp, it's just very much a shame. If you were standing, I'm assuming you're standing on a boat. I don't know that. And if you're standing on a boat, tripod probably is not going to help you. This might have been a good case where you could raise the ISO up to get a much faster shutter speed to hand hold this and get a sharper image. For those reasons, I only scored it 11 points. Next is Alice and the Snake. I was taken quite back by this image. It kind of popped up and I said, holy mackerel, what is this? Is it supposed to be a vampire in a coffin? I see she's got a little place on her neck where possibly she's been bitten by a vampire. It's pretty well lit. It's pretty sharp. I scored it 12 points just for technical. It's not one I want to hang on my wall, but it certainly makes a point. I'm assuming it's for Halloween. 12 points. Next is Ballet in Glass. Let me back up a minute. The print I called Evening in Cusco is actually Before the Storm. And that's the print with the lit buildings and the storm. That's called Before the Storm. Then we have Alice and the Snake. Then we have Evening in Cusco. My apologies. Evening in Cusco scores 11 points. I love the fact that the verticals are vertical. The exposure on the lights are very nice. It has a very warm tone to it, very comforting. But it's printed so dark that it took me a minute to see that the ladies down here in the lower left, to see them and see what they're up to. I felt like you could probably printed the entire image a little lighter and it would have brought out more detail in the lower left, and probably still would have had pretty good detail in the lights. So for that reason, the fact that I think it's too dark, I scored it 11 points. The next print is Ballet in Glass. It's by Sam Wilson. It's honorable mention and 13 points. It's a nice print. It's first I wondered why it had kind of a foggy feel to it. Then I see I'm pretty sure it's taken through water, or if not, maybe it's just the mist from the water is giving it that appearance. It has a really nice feel to it. It has a base for the glass to set on, and it's well exposed. Very nice print. 13 points. The next print is Tenant House. That's by Steve Sutton. It's really nice, and to get the shaded area and the bright areas all have detail, and it's because it's really early or late. I'm assuming it's really early light. It's well framed by the trees and the moss. It has enough detail in the shadow area. You can actually see the rocker and the hats on the rocker on the porch. It's just a really nice print, very well handled with the lighting that you had. And it scored, again, third place and 13 points. Second place is Dallas at Sunset, 14 points by Lindsay Grigshi. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly. It's by Linda. Beautiful print. The detail is just amazing. Boy, I'd love to see this printed much larger because there is so much fine detail in it. It scored 14 points. The reason it didn't score 15 points is the colors in the grass in the foreground. The grass is really green, and I feel like that's a little bit on the supersaturated side. The rest of it doesn't look oversaturated. If I was going to print this myself, first of all, I'd print it larger because I think it can certainly handle it. And then I might mask that bottom, that green, to make it look a little more natural. But a dynamite print. And I scored it 14 points. First place is Milky Way by Marie Henson. From where the audience is looking at this print, it is awesome. And if you get 4 or 5 feet away from it, it'll blow your mind. It's really nice the way it is. I scored it 14 points instead of 15 because the house is out of the depth of field. Now, when you're shooting something like this, you're going to have to go for the widest aperture you can get to capture the sky the way they have. And this is a little bit of a long exposure because you can see the stars are starting to trail. But to get a long exposure like that and to have a fairly wide aperture, your depth of field is going to be extremely shallow. So the house, of course, is a little bit out of the depth of field. That's okay. And lighting the house, this house is so well lit. I don't know if it was done with a flashlight. It may have been done with car headlights because it has a nice even illumination on it. And then someone went inside and fired off a couple strobes. It's really a nice piece. I can certainly overlook the fact that the house is a little bit soft because it's just so awesome. 14 points. This brings us to the master's print class. The first print is Fort Pompum, Maine. It's well printed. It leads your eye down to the end where there's no payoff. I wish there was a subject or something to look at after you travel down these arches. But it is a nice print. I gave it 10 points. Next is Hidden Beauty in the Rainforest, 10 points. If it is a rainforest, and you say it is, it's probably pretty dark in there, and you're trying to save what light you can reap with your camera. I think it's oversaturated, though, and because of that, I scored it down quite a bit. It doesn't look quite natural to me. Next is St. Paul's Cathedral from Millennium Bridge. Colors are very nice. Has a nice leading line right to the cathedral. You are on a bridge, and for that reason, probably maybe if you used a tripod, it was bouncing the camera up and down a little bit. I only gave it 11 points. I'd like to have given it more. You've got the vertical, and you have a leading lines. It's just, exposure is just really nice, but it's soft. And when you print one this size, with leading lines to your subject, the subject really needs to be sharp. So again, if you had the hand hold, maybe if you could have run the ISO up high enough to get a sharper image, a faster shutter speed, it might have helped. Next is Grand Canyon Reflection, 11 points. It's a nice print with the light you had to work with. You've got good detail in the shadows and good detail in the sunlit areas. It's a nice print. Next is Splendid Fall. It's a scene we've seen in photographs many times, and they're all nice, and this is another nice one. The colors are good, and I look close at this, and I'm wondering, there's a black area back near the center. I'm wondering, let's pretend that is maybe a black bear. That certainly would add impact and interest, and it looks like it could be. Anyway, Splendid Fall is a very nice print. It's a little low on impact for the rest of the competition. I scored it 12 points. Next is Sabbath Day Falls, 12 points. It's well composed. You've got the shutter speed where the water's just about where you'd like it. It's not too foamy, and yet it's not stopped where you can see individual drops. It's very nice. Colors are nice. It's a really nice print of that falls. 12 points. Next is Abandoned. It's a great find. It's sharp. It screams for black and white. Really works well here. I don't know, that color's probably a rust color, but it might have differentiated it better from the background. The car kind of bleeds into the background a little bit. Sharp, well composed, and an interesting subject. 12 points. Next is Gardens, La Force, Italy. 13 points. This is a very nice shot of these gardens. It's well composed, it's well printed, colors look to be right on. The sky looks maybe a little bit unnatural, but it's okay. It scored 13 points. The reason it scored a little better was I'm looking around and I'm looking for some other element. Had there been a person somewhere in the scene, it would have scored a little more maybe, but 13 ain't bad. Next print is Tres Amigos by Jose Ortiz. Honorable mention with 13 points. Wonderful colors and sharp as a tack. Super detail and really sharp. What an attention getter. 13 points. Next is Shadow Dancer by Larry Peterborg. Honorable mention, 13 points. We've all seen tons and tons of hot air balloons, but I've never seen one done like this. The colors really are awesome. The diagonal across makes it add strength to the print, and the silhouettes add interest. Just really nice. 13 points and honorable mention. Cowboy Early Morning, third place, 14 points by Lois Lehman. The backlighting on here really makes this print. The dust being kicked up by the horse with the light shining on it, and the grasses in the background highlighted by the light, and the starburst right there at the saddle horn, all give this super impact. A great image. Congratulations, third place and 14 points. Second place is Jordan by John Lehman, 15 points. I don't know what to tell you about this other than it's absolutely beautiful. It's a great study of a pretty young girl. It's well composed, well exposed, and the toning and the Photoshop work on it really just add a lot to it. Beautiful. And Jordan scores 15 points in second place. First place and best of show with 15 points is Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, by Ernie Tassick. Well, what can you say except that this is just awesome. And the figure in the back at the upper right, being slightly out of the depth of field, adds impact to it. Everything about this is just gorgeous, and you take it out of the plastic and you'll have a look at it, and what can I say? It's best to show. This concludes the prints tonight. Thanks for asking me to help you judge, or to judge for you, and have a good evening.